What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, getting down with Fresh Out. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the channel. You know, we're going to blow that thing up. And I have a special guest for you guys here today. You've been asking for me to get more women on the channel. So I have somebody here that will blow your mind with their stories, their personality, and their beauty. I have with me here today Lindsey, and man, she has some stories to tell. Lindsey has a really colorful background, and we're gonna get some good stories out of her today. So Lindsey, could you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up with a family that had an entertainment background? I mean, I know you know, I'm gonna let you kind of bust a bubble on, you know, your family background, but what was that like? Because, you know, people are fascinated with the entertainment industry, music industry, and I know there's a lot of questions out there.
Well, first of all, my father was the drummer and co-founder of a funk band called Confunction in the 70s and 80s. And so I was born into that. And my mom was a record executive, and she also worked with Confunction and many other groups. And so I was just born into that. I didn't know any other way. You know, I hung out at the studio, which was always really cool. There were always musicians over at the house. I mean, anybody from, you know, obviously the members of Confunction to like Herbie Hancock and some of the, like Sheila Escovedo and people like that. Like people like that were always around. So it was just kind of the life that I knew, and I thought it was pretty cool. I thought everybody's dad had a tour bus. You know what I mean? And, you know, I thought everybody's father was gone for months at a time, you know, in another country and stuff like that. And so that's just kind of, you know, me and my brother, that's just kind of the life we came up in. And it didn't really, I guess it didn't really seem different to me until other people would ask me, or especially when our mom got the job working with MC Hammer, and people are like, oh my God, your mom works for MC Hammer? And I'm like, yeah, we just saw him the other day. And they're like, oh, seriously? So it wasn't a thing to me until other people brought it to my attention.
Was there anybody, like, out of all the entertainers, which, you know, you met a lot of musicians and stuff, that really stood out, or you think like, you know, wow, you know, because I've heard stories about like Rick James and Prince and these people who are just like musical geniuses, and then some of their, you know, off whatever stage antics are crazy. I mean, is there anybody that when you think like, man, that guy he was out there, or he's pretty, you know, far out, or?
You know, I don't really remember anybody like that, just because I was younger, and I think when I was meeting them, they were in celebrity mode.
Okay.
So I wasn't around anybody enough to like kind of see them relax. And like you said, just kind of be them. And you're like, that's not what I saw on Soul Train last week. You know what I mean? So it's just, I'm sure had I been maybe a teenager where I was more aware of the world. Because even though my brother and I grew up with parents in the music business, we were exposed to a lot, but we were also sheltered to a certain extent too. Okay. So it's just a lot of stuff that I just didn't pick up on.
Yeah. Yeah, I was always curious about that, because I know I was watching something, and when Rick James' daughter was saying like some of the parties Rick James would have, and it seems like she was seeing things that she probably shouldn't have been around at a young age, and he was out there anyways. But it's just like pretty wild when you hear about some of the stories and stuff like that. And I know, you know, just it was a different era. I mean, that era Confunction, I mean, you had like Bootsy Collins, you had, you know, these different, you know, Brothers Johnson, you had these guys who were, the music was it was a different type of music, you know, and I don't know, I grew up on a lot of that old funk. My mom used to listen to those albums, so it just brings back a lot of memories when I hear that, like that old school, and you know, just that guitar tone and drums and stuff. Did you guys get to go to the studio a lot and see them perform, or?
I did. I know my brother was there. He's 3 years younger than me.
Okay.
But I remember hanging out at the studio. I mean, we were there all the time. And again, I just thought that was normal. You know what I mean? I thought it was cool. I loved the soundboards. You know, I used to get to go play in some of the recording booths sometimes. I loved, you know, I just thought that was just a cool experience. So that was kind of like my afternoon sometime. And because my mom was working with the group still, But she got to bring me and my brother along with her sometimes if they had to run to the studio real quick or there was a meeting somewhere. And, the members of the group in the studio were sometimes our babysitter.
Do you think by your mom being an executive in the industry, it helped with as far as your father getting knowing more about the behind the scenes? Because there's the whole thing, what Yee talking about how a lot of these labels kind of working on certain deals, and the music industry, they always talk about watch out for the contracts. Mm-hmm. I know, did your mom have a pretty good background on that, so she was able to kind of navigate through that? So as far as for what do you call it? What do you call it in music when you get your publishing and stuff like that?
So one of the biggest things my mom did was she actually went to law school specifically for contracts, just because of that reason. Because I think, and even now, but more so back then, these record companies would dangle the glitz and the glamour in the artist's face, but not reading through that contract. And don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. And a lot of people not realizing they were signing away their publishing. They were signing away any future, monetary gains and things like that. And so that's a lot of what my mom, the reason behind going to law school and helping the group read through those contracts and then negotiate things too.
Yeah, because what was I watching? I was watching something about, I think it was Isaac Hayes' son, was saying they just got his publishing back. I think it's 30 years, it reverts back. And when you hear a lot of these, TV shows are coming out or movies, and they play those old songs, somebody's been eating off those songs for years.
100%, and it's generally not the artist.
Yeah,
it's not the person that recorded it. They buy their catalogs. So any these music, a lot of the music that you hear a lot and often on commercials and stuff like that, most of the time the artist doesn't even own that music anymore. Some company owns it and they're getting the money off of it, just like you said.
And is that a result because the artist didn't have a good lawyer or manager, or they just signed before they knew what was going on? Because especially, a lot of the music from the 70s and 80s is still being recycled.
And that's because they're a part of these big catalogs and these companies pump them out. And just what you said, just not having good representation and not having a good understanding. The entertainment side is the entertainment side, but then you have the whole business side. And, artists are being smarter now by getting more involved. But, back then, it's just hey, we'll give you this car, we'll give you this, you'll go here, you'll get these jewels, you get all this attention, but nobody's paying attention to the fine print. That fine print is what will get you. And then you think, oh, I made this much money. And it's no, you didn't. You made this much money because this goes to your manager, this goes to the record company, this goes to this person, and again, that fine print means, that it means so much to people and they don't realize it a lot of times.
And as far as did you ever, when you think of I know Capitol was one of the big labels back then, and then they had, I don't know if Motown was still big back then, but when you see a lot of those big labels like that, and when you think about the music, are they pretty much the artist? Is it more or less a hustle for them to get the artist into these agreements, and hopefully that the artist will not know the business side of this and they're just thinking about performing? Because most of those artists, even, their concert tours, now they got 360 where they're eating off of everything. They're trying to work these artists like that. But, who do you think were some of the smarter artists who were able to kind of maintain their publishing? Or did most of those artists during that time, because they didn't know, get robbed of a lot of their actual music value?
Well, I think people like Prince, he was a holdout. He was you're not going to take my stuff and run. That's not happening. Even Michael Jackson, he was smart about his stuff. He was buying other people's catalogs, So, but you have to be careful because then you get deemed as the difficult person to work with. Because it's could you imagine creating something and there's somebody else coming along and saying, I want what you created. I now want to make money off of what you created.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people, Prince, when he went through his whole, the slave era, when he had that on the, that was him saying yo, I'm gonna finish this contract for you, but then I'm gonna go do what I want to do. This is my art. You don't get to do what you want with my art. And it's real easy for the record companies to do the glitz and the glam. And I remind people a lot of time, just for growing up and knowing a lot of stuff and having a little bit more detail on stuff because of my parents. I said, a lot of the things you think a celebrity has or a musical artist has, they don't. Those cars don't belong to them outright. Those houses don't even belong to them outright. A lot of times the record company buys that stuff, or they will even front them the money on stuff, and then they blow through the money. But the companies know they can keep them on the hook for a lot of things too, because it's like, hey, you blew through that advance. You know what I mean?
Now, taking that into consideration and fast forwarding it to now, do you think that, because, it used to be you would hear of an artist maybe having an overdose or something happening, you think, okay, no big thing. But now it's like, these artists are like, there's stuff happening all the time. And then there's, you find out that they're releasing all these other songs and the artist is gone. And then there's insurance policies. Do you think, not to sound like a tinfoil hat, that there's a little more something behind the scenes, or is it more beneficial for a lot of these labels now for these artists to not be, and then for them to hold their masters and like gradually release their music? Or, I mean, what do you feel about like that whole, what you see going on with the music industry now and just, what's, behind the scenes?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. It's just one, people aren't taking care of themselves properly. They're letting the fame get to them, and they're just ingesting any and everything. And then to some people, or record companies or managers, some people are worth more dead, than alive. I mean, sometimes like an artist can die and their record sales go through the roof. Way more than when they were actually alive. Now, I don't have obviously any proof that anybody's actually doing something to them or pushing something, but it definitely appears that way. When we've had a handful of artists die, not even by violence, just by drug overdose and things like that, just this year alone, you would think at some point people would be like, I'm only putting fruits and vegetables in my body. You know what I mean? Because nowadays with drugs, you don't even know what's in these drugs anymore. Like back in the day, people smoke weed, especially growing up in California, weed was a thing, and you really didn't think anything of it. But now people can't even smoke weed without it being possibly laced with something. Unless you grew that yourself, why would you trust it? And now you're putting chemicals and all this other stuff. So, I just think overall, like it's in our face. It's not something that is hidden. It's right there. And I think people need to take stock of what's going on and be like, ugh, maybe I don't want to be I want to perform, but I don't want to be a part of that life anymore. And then you're not clear-headed too. How are you supposed to take care of business if you're not clear-headed?
And as far as like just the influence on culture, I know funk had a big influence on culture, the way communities and stuff like that. Did you see that like there was like certain direction where there more or less freedom of creativity then to kind of like express yourself in your own way, or did the labels get involved? Because it seems like, I know now, it seems like, you hear certain rappers say, oh, the labels don't want us to really rap positive. They like that, because it's what's hot and it pushes sales and it drives a certain narrative.
Well, I think obviously, especially music was more organic too back, when my dad was making music, and obviously the music before, but somebody figured out a formula, what I mean? And even, we had the boy band craze, that was a formula, and each boy band, they had their own different type of personality. You had the cute one, you had the sensitive one, you had the thug, you know what I mean? You had the mysterious one. So, they had like these categories and they would just shuffle them through. And I mean, I think that happens with artists. So I do think now artists have less creativity because a record label already has the idea. They're just looking for somebody to fit in there. I mean, if you look at like some artists, like I know I watched an interview with Pink one time, and she was a different type of artist when she wanted to get into the music business. But when she signed that first deal, they changed her into something else. You know, so remember, she kind of started out with this R&B kind of sound and stuff like that. But then when she started doing her own thing, it was more poppy, more, I don't say pop, but kind of like with a rock kind of sound to it, but still with the vocals. So it's like they already have this manufactured cookie cutter thing, and we just gonna process you through. Some people wake up and they're like, oh, this mode does not fit me. I want to go do my own thing. And some people just process it along because, you know, that's all they know and they're just happy to be there.
I think too, another factor when I think about like the music in the era, you're coming off of the Vietnam War.
Yes.
There's the Black Panthers. There was like the protests. There's a lot of things that people were really moved about. So there was a lot of emotion in the music, and everything was instruments. It wasn't no keyboards. It wasn't a whole lot of that.
Right.
You know, you had a few people, but you had those bands, and they would get on there, and you would see the soul. It's like you watch an old concert. You're like, dang, man, you feel like chills up your spine because they're in it. It's not just somebody up there with a, what do you call the thing on your voice? The voice.
Yeah. They call it auto-tune now.
Auto-tune, yeah. But it wasn't, you know, Roger was the only one who really did it. Zap, you know. But I mean, it was a difference. So when you got on, you're like, damn, these dudes are grooving. It's like you felt a different vibe. And it's like you don't have, I don't know if you have that soulfulness like you used to.
You can feel it. Like I love watching live music. Like I love it. I don't care. It could be like at a bar down the street to like a stadium type event. Because although I grew up in the music business, I'm not creative. I cannot sing. I can barely play an instrument, but I really appreciate the creative process, right? Yeah. I love watching a performer, and I love watching somebody who's been playing these same songs, but it's almost like they're playing it for the first time because you can see it, you can feel it. And when it's live in the room, you can really feel that energy. And I love watching people, I call it the ugly face. When somebody's like really into what they're playing, or like a Bob Seger or somebody like that who would just get all his faces all contorted when he sings and stuff like that. And I can feel that, like you said, like you get chills. And there's definitely a big difference in someone who knows how to manipulate an instrument, and nothing against artists who, you know, have gone more the electronic way of doing things. But playing an instrument, I think there's definitely a different feel to the music, even like coming through the artist through that particular instrument, whether it's a keyboard, a piano, a guitar, the drums, like it feels different rather than it just being synthesized all the time. And I understand there's an evolution. You know, we have more technology at our feet. We can do things differently, you know, but I feel like I can tell the difference when artists collaborate with each other. And I always say they did not record that in the same studio. There's a different energy because now all you got to do is send the sound file to somebody.
You're right,
and then, so I've already put mine down, then you add it. But there's a different energy when you're in studio with that person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I hope we get back, it cycles back to more of that because, you know, like you said, the faces, I remember looking, you know, we look at Jimi Hendrix, the faces he'd be making when he's on the guitar, or like Prince or some of these people, and it's like, man, you can feel the music. So it was definitely a different era. So I was always fascinated by that. And I used to, even looking at the album covers, I used to go, the album covers are like art. You're like, oh man, look at that. You know, everybody, like you said, they had the different fly, you know, lapels on and this and that. So it was a different time, man, as far as music.
Well, and then too, the album covers, you know, before internet and, you know, before there was a TV or multiple TVs in every home, that's how you got to know the artist. Was those album covers, or waiting for them to perform on some of the Ed Sullivan's, American Bandstand, and Soul Train and things like that. That was your access to that artist. Now, you don't have to go anywhere to see an artist. You just click on your phone and boom, it's there. And I'm like, no, I want to be in the same room with that person.
Energy's different.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys, there you have it. Big Herc 916 with Lindsey. You got more to come. Subscribe, share the channel. Fresh out. Stop walking around with a crusty butt, smelly ball sack, and a funky hoo-ha. Big Herc said, wash that ass. Pick you up a t-shirt at FreshOutSeries.com.